Hey, this is Josh with Cultural Catholic coming at you with another Knowledge Monday. And today there was an eclipse nearby where I live, so I thought I'd do a little video on eclipses. So, little basics. An eclipse is when a celestial body is covered by another celestial body. In the case of what happened today, it would be the sun being covered up by the moon, and that can create a lot of excitement. So basically, for a total eclipse, which is what happened over a good swath of the United States, the moon has to be actually fairly close to the Earth to make it seem bigger than the sun, even though obviously the moon is vastly smaller than the sun. Um, and those conditions have to be just right because a little farther away you have this little halo, and it's called an annual eclipse, and that's a lot more common. And actually, depending on where you are in the eclipse path, it can also lead to a partial eclipse. Where I lived, it was a partial eclipse, meaning that depending on the distance away from where the total eclipse is, um, depends on how much of the sun gets covered up. So where I was, it was about a 90% eclipse, meaning 90% of the sun was. So say this is the sun, and this is the moon. It would, like the whole hand is the sun. It would mean that about this much is covered up by the moon. Now you could say that's kind of like an annual eclipse. With an annual eclipse, it's similar to a solar where it's completely covered, but there's a little bit of a halo constantly around of actual sunlight that actually kind of like illuminates the edges of the moon. I've heard it described like showing all of the edges and imperfections of the moon, for lack of a better term. Um, so yeah, that eclipses happen. Solar eclipses happen every 18 months or so. I looked it up, and there's like there's one every so often, but total eclipses are fairly rare. You're more often than not going to get an annual eclipse, um, and eclipses are actually getting total eclipses are going to get more and more rare because as the moon orbits the Earth in its elliptical or oval shaped orbit, it's getting farther and farther away. So we're more likely going to see an annual eclipse than we are a total eclipse. Now, there is another kind of eclipse that happens every so often, and that's called a lunar eclipse. And in this case, it's when the sun is covered up by the Earth and thus can't shine on the moon. Sorry, excuse me. And during this time, the moon actually kind of takes on a reddish glow. Um, that happens once a year or so. So again, like with the solar eclipse, you're not really going to see it that often because more often than not, eclipses happen over unpopulated areas. The joke I kept on saying was it's either over the ocean or Siberia where nobody lives. Um, so you're not going to see eclipses as often. Lunar eclipses are going to be total lunar eclipses are a little bit more often to happen where the moon is completely red. Um, Partial lunar eclipses also do happen. I can't remember what color that will be, but yeah, eclipses are actually really, really cool to watch. I actually watched the eclipse by using the pinprick method, which is where you take. What I did is I took a part of a cardboard box. I cut a hole in it, put some aluminum foil over, poked a pin in it, and then I just held it up and looked down, and I saw the little light beam that was made by the pinprick get smaller and smaller. And it wasn't because I put my hand over it, but because the sun was getting covered up by the moon. And it was really, really cool. But since it was a 90%, I could not look directly at the sun unless I had eclipse glasses, which I was too dumb to not buy. A little mad about that. Anyways, but it was just really, really cool to see. Another method would be to have eclipse glasses or a certain level of welder's mask. That way you can look directly at the sun the entire time. And in my case, I would be able to see the sun partially covered by the moon, which would have been cool. Um, and then for a lunar eclipse, all you have to do is be up at like midnight and just looking out your window to look at it because it's not the sun. A few years ago, I could have actually seen a lunar eclipse, but I decided to sleep on the Thursday night instead of stay up late. Um, yeah. Anyways, so that is today's video. This video is a little shorter because it's just about eclipses and not about the subject mini-series that I'm doing right now. But this has been Josh with Cultural Catholic, and I am signing off.